Paul, the holidays are, well, pretty much wrapped up for now. January 2nd, we're here recording today. How was your last couple weeks?
It was great. A relaxing period over the holidays. Usually, I don't do any traveling or anything. For the most part, family come to us. My wife and I, we hosted Christmas dinner this year, as we typically do. New Year's was a fairly quiet event. Just got together with another couple. But yeah, Christmas is always fun in terms of the gift receiving, gift giving. How about your Christmas?
Good. It was great. I like this time of year taking it off because it's when a lot of other people are taking the time off. So unlike other parts of the year where you take a vacation and you're the only one away while the rest of the people you work with are working away and the inbox is piling up, I like this time of year because it's generally quiet.
Yeah, something to be said for having that nice quiet week where you don't have a lot of emails. It's nice to get caught up on stuff. Typically I don't take a lot of vacation this time around because, I prefer to take vacation during the summer when I can be out golfing, enjoy the weather. But yeah, it's just quiet this time of year, which is good. There's definite advantages to that.
Did you give or receive any interesting gifts this year?
Well, in terms of receiving gifts, I got a golf distance finder. Hopefully it might help improve my game.
How does that work? Is it like a sensor sort of thing, or
it's sort of like a binocular where if you're trying to figure out the amount of yardage to a pin, in terms of like club selection. So yeah, like you just point this binocular at the flag and it'll tell you the approximate yardage rather than having to guess.
Finder.
Sorry, I meant to say like golf range finder. Nothing can help me find my golf balls. They're all over the place.
Well, I was intrigued by this when it sounded like a fairly novel invention. Mm-hmm. Now it's just kind of what's existed for years, but you just happened to get one as a gift.
No, to my knowledge, there's no such thing as a golf ball finder. That's probably some kind of conspiracy from the golf ball manufacturers wanting people to lose them, keep their business alive. But yeah, the distance finder, I don't know if that's going to maybe improve my game. I don't know. I'll take anything, but it is it'll be a useful thing to have, which I'm looking forward to using. In terms of gift giving, my wife and I were probably a little overly generous to my son this year. We bought him one of those VR headsets.
Oh,
virtual reality headsets that you put over your.
Is that like the
eyes.
Oculus one, or is this
the
PlayStation
Oculus
one?
Or? It's the Oculus.
Okay.
And we also got him gerbils. He's been pestering us for months, wanting to get gerbils.
Gerbils and virtual reality for Christmas.
Yeah, so a very eclectic mix of gifts that he's received.
Now you have cats, though. Like, is there going to be any issues with the cat and the gerbils?
We hope not.
Are there ground
gerbils
rules laid out with your son about that? Like, okay, now the gerbils stay in the
yeah, he's very well. He's 12, so he's very responsible in that manner. So he's the first one to make sure the cats are out of his. But yeah, no, the gerbils are in a cage, so they're safe. But nonetheless, we always make sure that the cats are sort of kept out of the room or certainly not allowed in there without supervision. You never know what could happen.
All right. Well, maybe that'll make up for a future episode. If you happen to have an episode at home.
I hope
this.
Not.
So for me, I got.
Yeah. How about yourself?
Yeah, this Yeti mug. I got. It's a metal mug by the company called Yeti. Yeti. I see their names on coolers and things. I got it from my boss actually, and I gotta say I love this thing. The quality it's first of all it's dishwasher safe, which I find any type of like thing you use to eat or drink with, if it's dishwasher safe, that's a huge thing. I hate something you have to specifically hand wash that you can't put in the dishwasher. So my Yeti mug, and for giving. I gave, I think, a very creative gift this year to my brother. Well, I guess is he our brother-in-law or my brother-in-law? He's dating my wife's sister or my sister-in-law, dating long-term partnership. I feel like I'm sliding into a hole I can't dig out of. But anyway, he's a big fan of the movie Sling Blade. And so I bought, I got a copy of the script because he likes to recite lines from the movie. So I ordered the pages and I had them bound together at like one of those printing house places. And, so now he's got his personal copy of the Sling Blade script that he can, take it out anytime he wants and recite from it.
That's actually a pretty cool idea. I never thought about that. Like for someone that's a huge movie buff, or if there's a particular movie, let's say like The Godfather or something like that, to be able to have like the screenplay. That would actually be, it's actually very creative. I'll give you credit for that.
I'm happy because I've talked on a previous episode about my angst around Christmas gifts or any kind of gift giving. If I get a lot of angst regarding it. So except when I find something cool, then it feels great to give a gift that has some creativity behind it.
And that is a good point about, I like to be creative or sort of think about things that people really want. Sometimes buying gift cards is unavoidable, but I typically don't want to buy gift cards. I'd rather buy an actual gift. Yeah.
Well, we probably should move. We're doing something a little bit different today, which is we're bringing a guest on, and this guest is actually someone that I've been talking to for a while about coming onto the podcast. I think been probably, 2 years maybe that we've been discussing having this gentleman come on the show, and he's going to talk a little bit about what he does. So I'll call it a little bit interview style, but then we're going to have a few topics that we've pulled out that we're going to all talk about together. So I just wanted to introduce my brother-in-law, John, who he's just come on to the camera. Hey, John.
Hi, Clark and Paul.
Hey, John. How's it going?
Excellent.
Glad you could be here.
Oh, we've been talking about this for a couple of years, so I wasn't sure if it was serious or not. And then
but here you are.
Here I am. I was bugging Clark about it and teasing him a bit, and then he said, "Okay, well, how about tomorrow then?"
Yeah, that's right.
That's how it happened.
We've made your dreams come true. Being on the podcast here.
Yeah, long time listener, big fan.
Good.
Here I am.
Yeah, and this is something I've made a point of saying in the past that we're always open to people giving us feedback, comments, questions, topic ideas, and I always open it up that if you want to be a guest on the show, let us know. And so we're bringing that to reality. We've done that with a couple other people before, but we're bringing John on, who, as he said, longtime listener. I think he listens to us in the commute to work, which we're going to talk a little bit about what John does, which I think is interesting. So welcome, John. Good to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
So John, go ahead, Paul.
Sorry, I was just going to note there that John's with a very exclusive company because we haven't had a lot of guests. We'd like to have more, but it's been quite a while since we've had someone on board.
True, actually, I should say that there's been other hosts, like with Salim and Justin have come on, where it's me and them, or Teresa. But you're right. I think the only time we've ever really brought or Mike and Ed have been on the show. This is one of the few times where we've had like you and me, Paul, bring somebody like a third person on. You're right.
Yeah. Well, you had my cousin Ken. He was on an episode. I'd like to have him come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, we need to have some more guests.
But today is about
keep us on our toes.
But yeah, and today is about our guest John. We want to make him feel welcomed and wanted here. So, John, one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on is because of your career, which is as a pilot of commercial aircraft. Works for a company called Porter here based out of Toronto. For 16 years now, I think. John, you've been there since the beginning of the company, right?
Yeah, it was hired there in the beginning of the startup. Actually, before we got any airplanes at all. And I had worked up in the Arctic, up in Yellowknife. Pilots typically have to build some experience before moving on to an airline. And for me, I decided to go where the job was, and which was up in the high Arctic in in Yellowknife, north of Canada here, in northern Canada, and I was there for 4 years, and then it was time to come back south. So, and my daughter was born up there, and that was a bit of a cue to come live a bit closer to family. So, Porter was just starting off, and I happened to be lucky enough to be part of that startup, and I've been there ever since.
Well, and you joined or got into, I think, what was your first day at aviation school? Was it like September 13th, 2001 or something?
Yeah, that's right. So actually, before that, it was a week before September 11th, actually. So I had a very stable job in insurance. This is how the sort of family intertwined a little bit here. And then, I've been thinking about being a pilot really since high school. And for whatever reason, maybe I didn't have the confidence to do it at the time, or thought it was going to be too difficult. Studied economics in university and got into finance and insurance. And then just got to the point where I thought, well, if I don't do it now, then I'll never do it. So I quit my full-time job.
And how old were you when you quit the job?
So I was 24, which right now 24 now seems so young, but it feels a bit old to be a pilot, which is a very strange thing now. But I felt like at the time I was like, oh geez, I'm 24. I'm really old. I don't have much time to waste here. I got to get going, or else I'll never do it. Which of course is over 20 years ago now. But so at the time I started flight school, and a week into it, I remember we were pulled out of class and we all sat in the lounge there and watched as the airplanes hit the buildings. So that wasn't very good timing for my career. So when I graduated a year after that, it was kind of an intense 1-year program. The only place where there was any prospects of any jobs were up in places like Yellowknife. So, moved up there. I had a friend who, a friend of my father's actually, who let me stay on his couch, and I quickly got a job as a substitute teacher, which is a funny thing to do when you go somewhere new. But up there, you have to have a high school diploma to be a substitute teacher. So I was qualified with zero training and experience to be a substitute teacher from kindergarten all the way up to high school.
So you went up there without a job in hand. So you got the job as a substitute teacher and then started looking for work, or you had some leads or irons in the fire and went up and just planted yourself there, became a substitute teacher? Or how did that work?
Yeah. So what I did is when I graduated, or was close to graduating, I started phoning every small airline or small aviation company from West Coast to the East Coast and up to the North. And it seemed like that the few companies that were up in Yellowknife were the only ones, A, would take my phone call, and B, had any sort of prospect of hiring anybody. And so I just decided to go up there and see what would happen. And that was the advice I was given as well when I talked to people who were up there. It was every week I would go to all the little companies up there and get rejected for 9 months straight every week. And then I finally got a job at a company called Arctic Sunwest Charters, and was working in their dispatch for another 9 months. And then one day they just said, okay, we got a flying job here for you.
Now, I had a bunch of questions about flying, but in general, now that you mentioned the being up in Northwest Territories, was it, or Yukon?
Yep, Northwest Territories in Yellowknife.
I should know Yellowknife, right? Grade 8 geography, maybe grade 7. You probably had some strange stories being up there in terms of maybe cargo you had to haul, or certain types of people, or like what was there something interesting you ever encountered in terms of like people or cargo? Or
so we would fly just about anything that was safe to put in the airplane. Mostly, we would go up there to help exploration companies establish camps. So you'd get a kind of a map and then a square on the map. So you got to, find a spot to land somewhere within that square. And so we'd find maybe a frozen lake or a beach or something like that, and land the airplane there. And then establish kind of a base camp area where we'd fly in all the supplies and the people, and they would start making their camp, exploration camp.
What I was going to say, what I find kind of interesting is that, as a rookie pilot, I guess some of your first jobs are probably some of the more challenging jobs, because being in Northwest Territories, obviously the weather is going to play an important factor, and you're flying into some pretty remote areas. There's got to be quite the element of danger involved. So, yeah, I guess it's christening by fire, I'm assuming, right?
Right. So that is a very funny thing about aviation, Paul. And, typically new pilots will either start off as being instructors, which is a weird thing. You graduate and boom, you're teaching other pilots how to fly airplanes.
Right. Yeah.
Or, you do something like what I did, which is to go up, fly from some small airline up in the Arctic somewhere. Some select few get to fly with, on a very sort of, maybe safer is the right word, but, or not, or more concrete path of starting off with a regional airline right off the bat of graduating. But that's pretty rare, actually. By far, the more common path is to either do instructing or some sort of small airline or whatnot. But yeah, going up there, I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. We did have to fly in extremely challenging weather, and doing things like having to make your own landing strip is an experience that I wouldn't trade for anything either. The weather would have to be fantastic when you go up there the first time, so you don't, land into a snowbank or onto any sort of rocks or whatnot. You have to be able to see really well, but then you would kind of clear the strip for everybody else if you're the first one in. So with shovels, and we'd have orange garbage bags to kind of make little markers along the little runway that we'd make, and then that would then be the place where you'd take off and land for that exploration camp.
Did you find the people you were flying got a little nervous when they would look at each other and say orange plastic garbage bags for markers, or were they like, wow, these guys are really intuitive or creative about how to get stuff done? Did you sense that at all? What people were like nervous about some of this kind of ingenuity that you were doing?
Well, not so much. I think the people that were there were used to that kind of thing. They were a bit more grizzled, maybe. I'm going to describe it as. So yeah, I never really experienced that part so much. And it seems very normal when you're up there to do that kind of stuff. And there is this kind of blind sense of trust with pilots too, that if you're in the back of the airplane, you just kind of trust that everything that's happening up in the flight deck is safe.
Well, because I've heard about people that fly, say, and this was what kind of plane, like a Cessna, or what sort of planes were you flying? Twin Otter?
That's right. It's a Twin Otter, so that's a 19-seat twin engine airplane. They're very rugged. It's built in Canada. You put skis and floats and they call them Tundra tires on them.
I was going to say that my experience, like when you hear about people getting into like small airplanes and going in, especially into remote areas, it can be quite nerve-wracking for someone who's never done that before as a passenger. And so you're saying, like, did you encounter that where people were like clutching their seat, like scared because this is not a typical airplane they're used to flying in? It's usually a commercial airline, jet, whatever.
From a safety perspective, I think it's not the airplane that's dangerous. We think that the bigger the airplane, the safer it is, and that's not really true. It's the other stuff that I think can be dangerous, whether it be weather or things breaking, or the pilots themselves making mistakes.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that's dangerous. and so, up in the Arctic when when I was flying up there, landing on an unprepared strip isn't in itself inherently dangerous, but if you do it when the conditions are bad, it's like riding a motorcycle. Riding a motorcycle isn't dangerous per se, unless it's raining or you're on the highway and you're weaving in and out of traffic and that kind of thing. It's like you have to make sure the conditions are safe for it. So, and not to say that flying an airplane in the Arctic is like riding a motorcycle. It's just an analogy, but the Twin Otter it's got turbine engines, which is the same as a jet engine on a big airplane. So statistically, the chances of the engine failing is very low, and it's a simple airplane, so there's fewer things to break.
So, John, when you're talking about how you got started as a pilot, that's something that was of particular interest to me because my 12-year-old son, he's huge into aviation, and that's, as of right now, that's what he wants to be, a pilot. He actually recently joined the Air Cadets. So I guess maybe one thought process, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that in order to gain experience, would be maybe to go the route of joining the military. Because I'm assuming that in terms of being a pilot, it's getting your hours in, getting the opportunity to fly planes. Do you think military is a route to go for someone that, let's say, wants to be a pilot?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I think Air Cadets are wonderful. You'd be surprised at how many commercial pilots were Air Cadets when they first started. And it's only a very select few that get selected for pilot training, because that part is very expensive, so they can only afford to train a select few. But, the vast majority go through that and meet like-minded people, and they become their friends and their colleagues throughout the whole career. Yes, military is great. I've met lots of fantastic ex-military pilots, but again, that's also not, I would say, the majority or even the most common route. I think that is one route that's wonderful, and I think the experiences you would gain in the military are fantastic. But lots of different ways to get there. The most typical thing to do would be to enroll in a flight college. And there's some really wonderful flight colleges that you can even get a university degree from. Or do what I did, which is go and study something completely different, or just go to any flight school in Canada or wherever you are in the world and ask, how do I become a commercial pilot? And then they'll happily train you to do that.
So I want to get back to that cargo question earlier. Any strange cargo, strange people that you want to share in your experience, whether it was up north or whether it was on your commercial flights now?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you one of each here. So, as I said, when I was up in the Arctic, we would bring equipment, and people up to do exploration. And depending on where you were at, there were different rules. So one particular place we went up, they had to bring everything out. Everything you brought in, you got to bring out again, they said. And this camp was built actually on the frozen lake. They were drilling through the lake, the ice, and down to the bottom of the lake to get core samples. So, we were disassembling the camp before the end of winter, and there was a big pile of bags on the side there. And we would fly bags all the time, like soil samples, we call them. So this is what they would pull out of the ground and have analyzed. So you got to bring that pile back to town. So, we had, we throw the bags, like make a little line, like, whoop, here you go, throw it in the airplane and bring it down into town. And we did this probably 6 or 7 flights and cleared up that whole big pile of bags. And then we got back to the camp and we took a break and we went into the kitchen tent. And the guys, the cook is like, hey, so you guys wash your hands? Yep. You're pretty cavalier about those bags there, tossing those things around. But yeah, that's what we do. We do that all the time. Feeling pretty proud of myself here. And he said, well, you know what that was? Soil samples? No, that was all the poo from the whole year.
Yikes.
Like human
human
poo?
Yeah, so they had an outhouse, but because they're on a lake, you can bury it. So they had bags for all their human waste. So
Oh my
yeah,
gosh. Wow.
yeah.
And was it frozen or?
It was frozen solid, yes, and it was. I was glad in retrospect that I did not know what in the world that was that I was throwing around, but
Yeah.
You're very glad that the bags did not break.
bags
And that it
didn't
was
break. Yeah.
frozen, and that. How long was the flight back? Because I would think some of this stuff might start to melt, and then maybe some odors might start to make themselves present.
Yeah, it was a short flight. I seem to recall it being 20 or 30 minutes into town, but yeah.
Okay, so all right,
So
that's one. Yeah,
So
go ahead, Paul.
so that would be fair to say that is your most unprecious cargo is bags of shit.
Yeah, that would be it, and probably the most expensive shit that I've ever flown around. By the time you figure the cost of having flown out of there, and then at Porter, it's nothing like that at all. I'll tell you, we had one around TIFF, the movie festival in Toronto. We often fly a lot of celebrities, and I remember around that time we went to New York, and I was the captain of the airplane, and when you're ready for boarding, they usually board what we call specials first, and these are wheelchair passengers or little kids and that kind of thing. So the customer service agent said we have one special. Okay, bring them down. So
that's to you or to the over the loudspeaker.
No, to me. The customer service agent asked if we were ready to board, and she said we have one special. So that could be anything, right?
Right.
Anybody who needs pre-boarding. So she said, and it's Hugh Jackman. Okay. And he's got an emotional support animal. Okay. So down comes Hugh Jackman, and he's got a perfectly manicured bulldog.
Not and a Wolverine.
No, and you're not supposed to bring a dog on board unless it's an emotional support animal. So, I ask, well, I was a little starstruck, as you would be around Hugh Jackman, and I said, "Oh, it's just so wonderful to have you on board the airplane." And I said, I like your dog. I didn't know you had an emotional support animal. And he said, no, it's just my bulldog. And then I thought, oh, geez, now I'm supposed to kick his dog off the airplane.
Which you promptly did, of course.
Which I did not. I just said, oh, okay.
But did you make the dog buy his own seat, though?
No, I didn't even do that. I was just way too starstruck for any of it. So I guess he had done the same thing when he checked in, and the customer service agent just marked it as an emotional support animal, and off he went.
So okay, so when you have like a celebrity passenger, like how do these guys fly without being like he sat at the front of the plane? Usually they sit at the front, right? So like everyone comes on, he's the first guy on, everyone's going to pass by. Does it cause a big commotion? Do people mostly go about their business and just didn't even recognize him, or do you like how did that go?
I think people do, when it's Hugh Jackman and he just looks exactly like Hugh Jackman, people obviously recognize. But yeah, there are a lot of celebrities that fly. Like you'd be surprised how often common that is, and most of the time they'll dress in a certain way, or maybe wear a hoodie over their head or whatever it is to not look obvious.
Yeah.
But I think some of them do look exactly like you would imagine them to on TV as well.
Now he's supposed to be super in fit. Like, did you get that sense when you met him? Like he was just like super fit.
Very fit and very, very kind and very nice. He was quite happy to chat. And I don't know what would happen if I told him that he had to get off the airplane with his emotional support animal, but
claws would have come out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's why he was being super nice to you, because he didn't want you to kick his dog off.
Oh, that's what happened. I was just thinking, he was just being nice to me because he thought I was great, but yeah, I got played maybe.
Just for Hugh Jackman, I heard him on an episode of Tim Ferriss, and he's great. He was an amazing episode to listen to. It's actually why I bought a rowing machine, not to get us off track, but bought a rowing machine because he's a huge proponent of rowing as far as working out. And I think he can do 2,000 meters in 7 minutes, which I can do it in about 10. So it's an incredible. It's kind of a benchmark to do 2,000 meters in 7 minutes. Apparently that's what he does. So not to get us too far off track. And we also weren't going to make this episode completely about aviation, but I do find this pretty fascinating, some of the things we're hearing here.
And we learned something here is that, if John is the captain of the flight, I can walk on board with my gerbil cage and claim that they're emotional support animals.
Yep. Yes. You now know how to get it done. Yeah.
But I'm not a VIP, so I probably would get kicked off.
Well, yeah, but and the rules around the emotional support animals are very loose. That is one thing that I do find very frustrating. You see all sorts of weird things. It was another lady that I remember was causing quite a ruckus. Their dog was barking, and to the point where before we left, I had to get out of the flight so I can go back and see what in the world was happening. And she said, "Oh, not to worry. I've just given him some drugs. He'll be sleeping in a few minutes."
Well,
and then, who's the emotional support animal? Is it you or is it the dog?
Well, that's it. So on a previous episode, way back with Simon, we talked about emotional support animals. I think we talked about one where someone brought a peacock on board an airplane. And Simon made the point that sometimes who is actually the emotional support here? Is it the animal or is it the passenger supporting the animal? So, but a peacock, I don't know if you've ever seen a peacock come on board, John.
I unfortunately have not seen a peacock come on board.
Or any strange animal, like any strange animals as emotional support animals?
Just misbehaving dogs is the worst one. Hugh Jackman's dog was perfectly behaved, by the way. So it was,
I can imagine that. I would expect that's how it would probably be with Hugh Jackman.
But you don't see that very often. Like, not on flights that I've been on. I haven't seen any emotional support animals in the cabin.
But have you seen animals?
No, like, I haven't seen any animals.
Because usually if it's there, it is an emotional support.
Yeah.
Although I think you can take, like, when we were in Japan, there was, we had 2 cats, and one ended up coming to Japan. And I think the option was there to bring the cat in a cage under the seat, and it didn't have to be an emotional support animal. I don't think, like, it could. That's some people. That's how they transport their pets.
Yeah, you can typically, depending on the airline, you can typically pay a fee to have an animal that fits in a bag that goes like a carry-on, so it would have to fit underneath the seat.
God, just imagine, like it's been in there for 3 hours, and you take it out, and it escapes running through the airplane. Cat running all over the place, or a dog, or monkey.
Spider monkey, yeah.
Any burning questions, Paul, for John before we move on? We can always bring John back.
No, I think I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your experiences and how you got started. I've always wondered, how does one become a pilot? So it's I'm glad you kind of informed us all as to the processes in place. And as I said, because my son has shown such a keen interest in it, something that I've now become quite interested in learning that process. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, not a problem.
I had one question, and I think you've told me about this before, John, because this military thing came up in the past. Wasn't that something that the military requires, like uncorrected 20/20 vision or something like that? Is that still a thing, and that was an inhibitor to going that route potentially for you?
Yeah, I think so. Well, for flying fighter jets, for sure, you have to have that. As you can imagine, if you're pulling 3 or 4 Gs and your contact lens pops out, then that's not a good thing. But but there's lots of flying jobs that are not flying fighter jets in the military. Helicopters and transport planes and that kind of thing.
Right.
So I don't have 20/20 vision, and I didn't in high school before I got into flying either. You have to have correctable to 2020 to be a pilot. That is a bit of a misconception.
Okay. And but does that include things like LASIK?
You can have LASIK, yep.
And was that always the case, or is it just because those sorts of surgeries have become more advanced and now they accept it?
Yes, so that's true. So in the early days, there was some reluctance to accept LASIK as an approved method for correcting your vision. But yeah, today lots of pilots have done the laser eye surgery thing, and as long as, again, you can go in front of the chart and prove that you're correctable to 2020, then you're good to go.
So there's an article that was I came across through a friend of mine recently, yesterday actually, the article from LinkedIn called 41 Big Ideas That Will Change Our World in 2023. And I was first fascinated a little bit that this is all going to happen in 2023 was my first reaction to reading through some of these things. But what we wanted to do was talk about, two or three of them that jumped out for us. And so these are things that this article believes will be game changers or will be a trend for the new year that we're in now. And the one of them, number 8, was crypto. And with Sam Bankman-Fried and then the FTX meltdown, crypto, you kind of have a love or hate relationship, I think, with crypto. And this article is saying that crypto, facing a trust crisis, will confront its biggest hurdle, widespread adoption. So I'll just kick it off. Do either of you guys own any crypto right now?
I don't myself, no.
But I did. Sorry, I did invest in crypto technology, which I've sold now. I think I'm done with crypto.
Crypto technology? Yeah,
just a couple of stocks that were not crypto stocks, but crypto technology stocks, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
but they weren't coins.
No, that's right.
Yeah,
it's just too volatile, I think, for me anyway.
Well, and I think it's one of those things that people, like a lot of things, and you could include stock in this, is that people think that because there's been so much hype around how much it was when it first came out at, and then it was $70,000 a coin at one point, up from a couple $100 when they first came out. So I think there's a get rich quick element to a lot of these things, and I think that's where some people feel, oh, hey, if it went from 10,000 to 70,000, well, if I don't get on this now, maybe I'll be missing the boat.
Yeah.
When it comes to crypto, leading up to its downfall, it was definitely the trendy thing for people to jump on board with getting into crypto. Now you don't hear about it as much in terms of, you don't see the commercials nearly as much as it used to. So I don't know, maybe it's just the perception that people have started to lose interest or have moved on to something to alternatives to this.
I mean, I think there's a lot of I don't understand crypto or what's the other name for it? Cryptocurrency. What is it called? It's
like blockchain, you mean?
Yeah, the blockchain but there's an easy tendency with this sort of stuff that just because you don't understand it, you can take the sort of old man approach that this is ridiculous. This is I can't touch it, feel it. It's this thing in the cyber sphere. I do think there's a lot of logic behind it in terms of what the background, that I think it is still, it's not going away. This is not going away, but it's too easy, I think, to dismiss it as, you think it's this kind of strange technology and it's just going to be a fad. I don't think it's going to be a fad.
That element of trust, if we go back to the trust thing, with cash, you can always go to the ATM and get a wad of cash out and stick it under your pillow. For me, I don't carry really cash around anymore at all, but I think at the end of the day, to get mass adoption, you have to be able to put your fingers on something. And so the fact that, the four or three of us here could, have a big speculative debate about what the blockchain really is kind of the root of the problem. It's like, it's so hard to put your finger on what a Bitcoin is.
Right.
Because it doesn't physically exist. It's just a node on a ledger somewhere in cyberspace.
Yeah. So I bought some Bitcoin, not Bitcoin, but I bought a few cryptocurrencies about 6 months ago, partially because I was thinking, I just want to invest in it to understand it, because it's like real estate, and that's real estate topics come up on a couple episodes, that until you're actually in it, you really truly will struggle to learn about that thing. When you're in it, you start to read up on it. There's some impact on you by investing in it. I didn't buy a lot. I bought about $1,500 worth of various cryptocurrencies. I just thought I got to get into it so that I can at least learn more about it. My cryptocurrency holdings are down about 30% since I started investing in it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to cash out. It's just going to stay there. It's just kind of a placeholder for me. Will I make a lot of money off it? Probably not. But so I do own some.
Yeah, I think for currency to be widely adopted, it has to be stable. It's why people always flock back to the U.S. currency when the markets are volatile. It's because you have to have a stable currency for it to be widely adopted. And the fact is that Bitcoin isn't. By just its nature, it's not stable, and that's what
it's
makes
unregulated
it exciting too. Yeah, and it makes it exciting. That's how you can double your money, is by it being so volatile. But that's the very thing that means that you're never going to go pay for coffee in Bitcoin at Starbucks, because that coffee could be then worth half the price to the seller the next day when it's all of a sudden dropped at half its value.
But people can buy things like coffee and go to Subway with crypto.
But so does the price change every day then? But I don't know, because I've never paid for things in crypto.
Well, I guess it's like going to a Starbucks in the U.S. with a Canadian credit card, that today your exchange rate was this, so now it's going to cost this much in U.S. dollars. I think it'd be the same thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. But changing a percentage point here and there is different than 20 or 30% or whatever it is.
True. Yeah. Paul, you own any crypto?
No, I do not own any crypto. You raise a good point about, until you purchase some and force yourself to get involved into sort of have a stake in it. That's only then is when you're truly start to learn something about it. That's a good point you made, with respect to both real estate and crypto. But no, I haven't bought into it. My brother has, and he's tried to explain it to me, but it seems to go over my head. But no, I would like to learn more, because you're right. It's not going away. It's definitely, a means of currency that is, will continue to develop in the future. I don't know what we're going to see in 2023. I think their predictions for 2023 were pretty bold, but, it's not going away, and it's definitely going to advance over the next few years, and maybe one day it will become more mainstream.
All right. Another one from here was number 7 was cities will feed themselves. And John, you found this one interesting. What jumped out for you on this one?
Yeah. So, I think to feed yourself, you'd have to support yourself through the whole year. I like going to the supermarket and being able to buy an apple every day of the year. But, living in Toronto here, we obviously don't grow apples all year round. So sometimes it's local, and other times it comes from warmer climates like Mexico or California or whatever it is.
And I think it's important to say, though, that I probably should have done this with crypto. What this article is saying is that a new crop of indoor farms now taking root in cities around the world could help feed this booming population, which is 6.5 billion will be living in urban spaces. So the whole talk is about these vertical farms, warehouses converted into growing spaces for crops ranging from leafy greens to herbs and strawberries. By 2030, the indoor agribusiness could be worth $33 billion. So back to your point, to turn all this around and get this going in 2023 seems a bit ambitious.
So can I make a point about the environment, though? I think that for crypto too, the crypto is incredibly energy wasteful.
Burns, a lot of carbon.
Yeah, but also with food too. I mean, the fact that I want to have an apple every single day of the year at the supermarket means that it either needs to be grown in some sort of artificial environment indoors, which is going to, you have to heat it and light it and all this kind of stuff and provide a tremendous amount of water.
Yeah.
Or have it shipped from Mexico, which in itself is very energy wasteful. So maybe the problem is me as a consumer is that we expect the same thing every single day. We should just be instead just eating what's in season.
Right. Whereas for us in Toronto, that if you aren't talking about imported or indoor grown, it could be fairly limited.
Yeah, it's almost impossible unless you want to eat just canned food or pickled things or like that. Mm-hmm. That's how traditionally you would preserve, right?
The old days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this has a lot of merit to it because you're right. With that many people living in cities, the food has to come from somewhere. And we're seeing it even here in Toronto with, recent headlines with housing developments being built on green spaces. So yeah, farms are becoming more and more, decimated by urban growth. Farms are becoming further and further outside the city. So, to convert industrial warehouses into basically greenhouses, I guess, probably is a true necessity. What the article doesn't mention here, which I'd be interested to know, is in terms of genetically modified food, in order to produce this much food, in terms of any kind of growth hormones that are being used.
Is it safe? How healthy is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. We've created a means to build or to grow cheap food within the cities themselves. But is this food going to be healthy? I think that's a key point right there. And we're seeing, more and more people are trying to get away from, GMO foods and, more to healthy foods that, or organic foods that are grown naturally as opposed to being grown in large warehouses and in greenhouses and areas like that. So, yeah, it's just, a lot of different things can come out of this and that, you're going to sort of see a fork in the road here where one path goes to, cheap mass-produced food because if you have to feed the people in the cities, maybe the lower income people, but, you might see people that are in higher income brackets that there might be more of a push to natural and organic foods.
Yeah, and land is, people are building on land, so farmland all over Ontario. This is actually a bit of a hot button, right? The green space thing, and that as farmland gets built over, people are deciding to sell their farms. They don't want to be in the agriculture business anymore. They're getting older, retiring. The places to do the farming is also reducing, and you could say climate change is also making some areas of the world less able to grow the things that maybe it was growing 25, 30 years ago.
If you recall one of our previous episodes, I think we talked about golf courses being torn down due to the farmland being expensive. So, if you got golf courses being knocked down, farmland is definitely going to get knocked down because if farmers, in most cases, the newer generations don't want to get into farm work anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So, a lot of farmers are taking the payouts because their land is so valuable.
All right, let's take one more thing from here. Number 19 was cities will turn themselves into urban reserves to limit mass tourism. Says here that global air travel has rebounded to nearly 75% of pre-pandemic levels, according to September data. But expect local communities in tourist hotspots to only let their floodgates open with supervision, which is interesting that some cities have been overrun with tourism, or the particularly European cities, and that Barcelona, for example, is putting restrictions on tour group sizes, and even the use of megaphones, it says here. I guess that's what yelling out, doing the tour guiding with over loudspeakers, I guess is what that means. This was it. I just thought this was interesting to curb the visits, which I don't know if that would make retailers happy.
Yeah, I was going to say the portion of the article here, which really tells it all, Venice, in terms of creating urban reserve, curbing the number of day visitors, requiring tourists to purchase entry tickets when not staying overnight, and they can risk fines. So that I found particularly interesting in terms of making a day trip into a city. You have to pay admission, which is really, I've never heard of that before, but I guess now we're seeing that come about.
Yeah. I wonder if, COVID has reset people's expectations a little bit. I'm sure if you were a resident of Venice, it was a bit of it was nice not to have a million people invading your city every single day.
Yeah.
With with ships and tourists and stuff like that. But, Venice is such an interesting example. It's a relatively small city with limited space because of all the water and the canals and stuff. It's probably not the same for places like New York or Paris or London or other places. Can you imagine having to pay a fee to enter London, let's say, or New York? That just couldn't work, I don't think.
But we could see that in terms of North American cities. Like, for example, like Quebec City, that's a small area. Like, you may have to, will there be a day where you have to pay admission to do a day trip into Quebec City or something like that? It could happen.
I could see it. I could see them embedding it in a way that's almost not as, like, you're not at a gate where you're going into Quebec City and giving somebody, tapping your credit card or paying money. It'll be more discreet. It'll be like the way they do with airports, where you're paying some sort of a levy for flying into that airport. I think that would be how they might tackle it. But then would that curb the tourism, or would it just be another income source that's being brought in at the back end?
Well, when you think about it, we've kind of been paying those fees for such a long time, like hotels, like tourism fees.
VAT taxes or...
VAT taxes, even at restaurants. I've seen tourism taxes at certain restaurants, depending on where you are. So in some ways, we've probably have been paying some of these tourism fees, quote unquote, for quite a few years, and most people don't even realize it.
Yeah. So free market economics, is that what we're saying? Is expensive hotels and taxes and fees that'll drive the tourists out?
Yeah, I don't think it'll make a difference. I think it would have to be to make a difference. So if the idea here is to try to curb the amount of people coming into the city, I think you're going to have some people that aren't going to appreciate that because they depend on that business. I think you would have to make it so obvious to the person, like literally you drive up to the gates of Quebec and you have to tap your card because it's $30 for the family to come into the city. I think it's going to have to be that obvious to actually make any kind of a difference.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. In the article, it says here, expect certain cities like New York, London, etc., to tamp down on short-term rentals. So, for example, Airbnb. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what that means. Like, if you're coming in for like a 4-day visit, is that what they're trying to cut down on? Like, I'm a little confused on what that means.
It's a good point. It's almost, I don't really understand that all that much either. I know that, as the article, that section says, that there's been a lot of conflict between, say, New York City and Airbnb, and that they're saying that there's a strict new registration system coming in January. But it doesn't really relate back to how is this going to curb tourism, because there's still hotels. So I guess unless they're saying this provides more options for people to come to the cities, so they're trying to shut the inventory down a little bit. Maybe I don't really get that either.
Or they want people to go to the hotels, therefore they're paying their additional taxes and fees.
Well, a strict new registration system would imply that would be part of that. So, for example, my Airbnb in Trenton, 4% is charged for every guest as it's what Trenton has decided they want to take a piece of the action on every Airbnb rental. So that would be similar to a hotel. It's actually what the hotels would charge. So when you hear about registering, like Airbnb in it's not like this in every city. Some ban them outright. Some have really strict restrictions, and others just say 4% on any booking, which is what hotels have to pay. That's how that appears, or what that looks like.
So isn't that in essence what we're talking about then, is a fee to enter?
Yeah.
I mean, 4% is pretty significant, I think, if we think of the grand scheme of it. Yeah.
It is. When you look as an Airbnb renter, like as a guest, you have your per night fee, you've got your cleaning fee, you've got the 4%, you've got tax. It does add up. Like, I mean, as a host, I've had a few people come to me and say, hey, after all your fees and everything, this is way too expensive. Would you consider reducing your nightly rate? But like, I can't control these other charges, and this is the way it works. So, no, I'm not going to reduce my monthly rate, whether you're family or not.
Right. And so just so the listener knows, that was me asking that question.
Yes. Well, John.
There's no friends and family rate.
No, we talked about that. Okay. Well, there's a lot of stuff in that article. We don't have enough time to go through it all, but we did want to have a bit of an opportunity I had some things I came up with that I wanted to ask you guys about, real quick questions. So allowances for your kids. Do you guys have, what's your philosophy on allowances for your kids? Paul, does your son get an allowance? How does it work in your family?
Yes, he does have an allowance. It's about, $10 a week, but only if he does his chores. So,
okay.
You have to work for that money. It's not just given to you. But yeah, my wife and I, we implemented this maybe about a year ago, just sort of as a means to teach.
How'd you come up with a number?
Well, I guess we kind of played around with it. Initially, I think we did like $15 or $20 a week, but then we realized that was kind of a lot of money. So I think $10 is enough that it's not it's not going to break the bank, but it's enough that it teaches my son. There's incentives involved in terms of completing tasks or doing what we ask him to do. It makes for a good reward system, but it's not a large amount that it's not going to, make a big difference. But, I think around the age of, 10, 11, 12 and up, I think allowances can be a positive thing for kids.
How about you, John?
Yeah, so I have to be a bit careful because both my kids are avid listeners of the podcast here.
That's right.
And I just fed them ideas.
Is he going to get more? Is he? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, my daughter's 17 and my son is 12, and we talked about allowances incessantly between my wife and I, and we haven't given them an allowance, and I'm not even sure if that's the right way forward or not. My daughter has a job now, so she earns some money on the side, and yeah, my son, he obviously doesn't have an allowance, but he seems to hoard his money in his bank account too. So
he's got his birthday money and Christmas money and things like from family, and
yeah,
that's starting when I start seeing the numbers adding up of when these birthday parties. It's not an insignificant amount.
No, that's it. So both of them have quite a healthy bank account, and they probably have more cash on hand than I do.
Yeah.
So,
but One of the philosophies with allowances, though, is that it gives the kids an opportunity to just have a float that they can choose what to buy things with. So we have allowances for our kids. It's $10 each. It's been that way for about 4 years. My kids don't really listen to the podcast, so I'm not too worried about what they might think. I could say that we've never raised it, so inflation hasn't hit the allowances. It's been pretty much frozen since the last. My kids are 14 and 11, so they've had allowances for probably the last 4 years. What I liked about them was that if we went to something like a Christmas market or a tourism-y place and they wanted to go to the gift shop, then it was like the allowance would be there for that type of thing rather than us having to kind of deal with it on an individual basis. So we could say, well, do you still have allowance money? Well, yeah, we do. Okay, well, if you want to buy something here, then you can buy something here.
Yeah. I think the good thing about allowance is that it also, like our thought process is that it's to teach them the value of a dollar, to make them understand that, money doesn't grow on trees. So a recent example is I mentioned before about acquiring these gerbils as his Christmas
Gerbils
gift.
don't grow on trees either.
Well, exactly. But, these gerbils, he's been pestering us for about 6 months now to want these things. And obviously there's going to be startup costs involved. And we, as his Christmas gift, we bought him, the starter kit. And he received a bunch of gift cards from PetSmart, which helped pay for the gerbils and some of the equipment and stuff that you're going to need for caring for these things. But there's obviously going to be ongoing expenses. And we said to him that going forward, you have to start using some of your money to pay for these, for the food and for the supplies and stuff, because, they're your pet now. And as they are your pet, you have to start using your money to help care for these things. And by doing that, I think it will teach him the value of a dollar. Knowing
you
that
have cats too, right? So are they in a different category?
Well, the cats are my wife and I, we pay for the cats. That's the cats are sort of our pets. But
gerbils are
the
further
gerbils,
down the food chain, though, right? So
well, that's exclusively his pets. Like that's what he wanted. That was his thing. So it's like, okay, so you wanted these gerbils. Now you have to be responsible for them, and part of that means having to pay for them. So going forward, that's the thought process in terms of, him making money, and he's at an age now where he can start, snow shoveling and stuff like that to earn some money, and whatever he gets with his allowance. And by having to use part of his allowance to pay for food and stuff, as I said, hopefully that teaches him the value of a dollar.
So what happens, Paul, if he runs out of cash and can't pay for litter, or is it sawdust or whatever it is, or food for the gerbil? Do you float some money at some interest, or do you just save? That's the harsh life reality.
Well, no, that actually a good point in that is you're right. If his money supplies tend to go down, if he's spending it on video games, then that's when we're like, no, that's not.
You've got these creatures over here that are depending on you to supply them with food. That's part of the lessons that we're trying to teach him, is that he wants to, instead of buying $50 on a video game, you better save that money, depending on what your bank account states, because you got gerbils to pay for. I think this has a whole...
it's making them make choices to realize that, you're not going to be able to buy everything you want. There's responsibility.
I'll just ask philosophically, but would you allow the gerbil to starve to teach that important life lesson?
No,
like, let's say...
I'm not that cold-hearted. Hey, worst case scenario, I'll jump in and
feed them to the cats.
We would pay whatever money needs to ensure that the gerbils don't get eaten by the cats. But either way,
you could sustain the household, in the winter months.
All right.
So no, we're not gonna make the poor little buggers starve. Don't worry.
Okay, one quick last one here. Spontaneity. I think some people like spontaneity and some people don't. And specifically where I'm coming from with this is with things like guests or drop-bys, like to go and visit someone that you're in the neighborhood, right? The old days of, hey, we're in the neighborhood, knocking on the door and checking in on your relatives, your friends, saying hello. We have talked about this on a previous episode a little bit. You know, is there an expectation for people to stop by if they're in the neighborhood? But what I want to specifically get at is, do you guys have this kind of spontaneity? Like, do you have friends and family that just sort of ding dong, oh, I wonder who that is, and then you open the door and it's your father-in-law or your a buddy? How much spontaneity is in your life in general, or is everything just pre-planned these days?
Well, I think so. You know, for New Year's, I came over to your house, and that was as spontaneous as it got. You know,
yeah,
like a text in the morning, not a phone call, because then
spontaneous as
the
it gets would be
awkwardness.
you being on the doorstep, just ringing the doorbell.
Yeah, so that would never ever happen, I think, in my world anyway.
Right.
But even just, you know, inviting myself over on the day of felt awkward. I sort of envisioned my sister telling you, hey, my brother's coming over and he's bringing the kids. They're sleeping over, and then it would turn into an argument. Yeah, like a massive argument.
Right. Like let the kids go to their rooms, shut the doors while we sort this out.
Right.
That kind of argument.
That's how I envisioned that happening. And then I just showed up anyway.
Yep.
Is that what happened in the background, Clark? Did you?
No, there was no behind the scenes. I think the only thing I said was, damn, that means I have to like take all the computer equipment out of the office and set up the room. That was the only little bit of aggravation, but more than made up by your presence and your children's presence in our home.
Nice save there, Clark.
Yeah, well, I did bring beer too, so
that helped.
Helpful. Yeah,
even better.
We had a funny little thing. We went over to a friend's house that night who was hosting a New Year's thing, and John brought his pack of beer. It was in one of those sort of insulated cooler cases, and the friend we were visiting, we said, you know, where should we put our stuff, like our beer or whatever, and he says, oh, you can just unload it all into that cooler there in the back. And I said, no, we'll keep it separate. And then I promptly said, but I'll take a couple beers from your cooler, please. And I suddenly thought, I was just trying to make it easy, but then I realized, oh, is this one of those things where we're just gonna, at the end of the night, we're gonna drink all his beer and then pick up the full case of John's insulated cooler pack and leave?
Yeah, so that is what happened. And Paul, just to make it even worse, when I got home the next day, I realized that Clark had put some of his beer into my cooler pack, which we also didn't drink, and I took that home with me. So
yeah, you made out really well.
A bunch of freeloaders then, huh?
Well, I brought home my beer and Clark's beer, and I drank someone else's beer.
So the last laugh definitely goes to John.
Uh-huh. God. Well, yeah, just on that topic of spontaneity, I guess these days now where, you know, having someone just show up unannounced at the doorstep is pretty rare.
It is.
It doesn't really happen to me very often. And I'll be honest, I don't really like it, you know, just people showing up unexpected when you're unprepared, or, you know, it's like thought process. Oh, geez, had I known you were coming, I would have cleaned the house, that type of thing.
Now, Paul, by the way, keeps a very neat and tidy house. It's one of those houses that there's never any clutter around. So either he wants to protect that image that it's always like that, and then if you just show up at his door, it's like, holy shit, this place is a disaster, Paul.
Yeah, protecting the image, yeah. But yeah, like it's one thing to text people that a couple of hours ahead of time, just saying, hey, I'm going to be in the area, you up for me coming by? You know, that's different. I think, you know, the whole spontaneity, as long as you text people before and just give them a heads up, I think that's the sort of the right thing to do. You know, especially, hey, you got that image to protect. You know, you got to have that nice clean house and clean up the gerbil crap all over the house, right?
Well, but John was mentioning when he lived out up north, way up north, the community there was more suited to a drop by. It was almost the environment that you lived in, right?
Yeah. And what was interesting up there is that people would either you're either from there or you're not from there, and if you're not from there, which most people were not from there, then your friends become your family. So
kind of like an expat community, the way it was for us in Tokyo.
That's exactly it. So yeah, people all the time would drop by spontaneously up there, and my wife and I would as well. We'd go for a walk and they're so and so's house. Let's knock on the door and see what's up. So it's you're physically closer because it's just the layout of the city, but also people would just drop in all the time. It's very different, and I kind of missed that too. There was something nice about that.
Yeah, I guess people in the city, there's a tendency to kind of keep to themselves, especially in the winter time. People kind of hibernate for the winter, and you only start to talk to your neighbors again in the springtime.
Yeah, I think that spontaneity thing is it's got a romantic notion to it. Like everyone, like it is kind of cool just that somebody can just show up and you bring them in and you serve them an Entenmann's or a plate of ginger cookies or something. So I think maybe there's some of it's a romantic notion that we're attracted to when it comes to this sort of thing. But the reality is, having the place prepared in a sense for the visit. And as well, if you were moving in a certain direction that day of like, you're going to go out and do something, run errands, or you had a certain plan, and then all of a sudden someone's on your doorstep. There's that as well. People sometimes don't like that, having to pivot.
Yeah, but again, that's where you would always text someone to heads up. Like the one thing to say, hey, I'm in the area. Would you like me to come by?
Right. But I'm saying if you wanted an environment or the romantic notion of an environment where there isn't that texting in advance, it's just, hey, we're walking by Paul's house. Let's knock on the door.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's something that is
dead.
sort of, that's gone by the wayside in terms of that.
It has. Well, guys, it's, we blew past our stop time here. But I really enjoyed bringing John on for this episode. I hope people found it interesting as a listener to hear some of the stories. We'll definitely do some, what do they call that when the TV shows run some numbers to see how the audience, what do they call it? There was a name for that, like Ipsos Read or something.
With the
ratings?
Like the Nielsen ratings or something like that?
Nielsen ratings.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes. We'll run some of those, see how everybody responds to John's being on the show, and if it's positive, then maybe we'll have you back, John.
Nice. We'll talk about it for 4 years or so, and then maybe one day it'll happen.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on.
How many fans are we talking about? Like 10 people or so?
Fans of who? John?
Well, the listeners. I still like to know how many listeners are. How many people tune into? We talked about this.
That is
how many
a safely
fans
guarded secret that only the founder of the show is able to know about. But we do have more than 10 listeners. I know that for a fact.
All right, that's good. I'm very glad to hear that. It was great to have you on the show, and I'd love to have you back anytime.
Thanks so much, Paul and Clark. It was fun.
Good. Well, enjoy the rest of this holiday. If it's another week or whether it's ending today, enjoy, and we'll see you next time.